I got my horrible boss fired and arrested by following the rules he broke. If you had told me a year ago I'd be instrumental in getting my own manager fired and even led away in handcuffs, I would have laughed, albeit nervously. Yet here I am, living it. This saga is a wild ride of corporate politics, paranoia, and karma coming back around. Some background. I, 32F, work for a mid-sized tech company in the operations department. My boss, let's call him Brad, was the ops director. Brad was the kind of boss who gives nightmares a bad name. From the day he joined our company 2 years ago, he ruled with intimidation, manipulation, and a complete disregard for both company policy and basic decency. He was charming to higher-ups, but a tyrant to anyone under him. Unfortunately, I reported directly to him as one of the operations supervisors. Over time, Brad's behavior went from frustrating to downright toxic, and even illegal. He would scream at us in meetings, call people idiots or worthless, then turn around and brown-nose the CEO with a smile. He forced our team to work through breaks and off the clock, slyly hinting that anyone who complained could find another job. Overtime pay? Forget it. Brad would alter timesheets so it looked like no one ever went above 40 hours. Yes, that's wage theft. And yes, it's very illegal. Company policy clearly requires accurate time records, but Brad openly scoffed at that rule. Expense reports? He'd have us lie and categorize his personal dinners and golf outings as client meetings. Safety regulations? He once ordered us to operate a machine without the proper lockout procedure because it was slowing down production, basically telling us, I don't care if it's against protocol, do it or you're fired. He had zero regard for policy or for our welfare. The worst part was how he treated people. One of my coworkers, let's call him Jim, took a 2-day leave when his wife gave birth. Even though it was approved time off, Brad was livid that Jim wasn't there during a busy project. When Jim got back, Brad publicly berated him in front of the team, shouting, "Must be nice to have a vacation while the rest of us pick up your slack." Jim was nearly in tears. And HR did nothing, because Brad had cultivated an untouchable status with them, or maybe they were just spineless. Complaints against Brad seemed to vanish, or were met with, "We'll look into it," followed by nothing. I became a target of Brad's ire early on, probably because I have a habit of gently pointing out when something isn't following procedure. I'm naturally a rule follower. I believe procedures exist for a reason. That put a bullseye on my back. If I even dared to say, "But isn't that against company policy?" Brad would explode. I learned to shut up and keep my head down, until I realized that doing so was only enabling him. The turning point came about 6 months ago. We landed a major client contract that could be huge for our company. The pressure was on to deliver, and Brad went into overdrive with his demands and rule bending. He mandated unpaid overtime for our whole team, just outright said, "We're not clocking overtime, period. I don't want to hear complaints." He also started doing something I found particularly disturbing, falsifying compliance documents. Our industry has regulatory requirements, safety and quality checklists, that must be submitted to the client and to government regulators. Brad discovered that some of our internal reports showed we were falling behind because he had people working double shifts with no rest, so errors were creeping in. Instead of fixing the issues, he ordered me and another supervisor to fake the reports. Basically, he wanted us to sign off that everything was up to standard when it wasn't. That was my breaking point. Not only was that flagrantly against the rules, it was straight up fraud. If it ever came out, the company could face massive fines or lose the client. And guess who Brad would throw under the bus for the falsified reports? Yours truly, since my name would be on them as the supervisor. I realized then that I needed to protect myself and stop this. I was done being the good little doormat. If HR wouldn't step in, and if higher management was oblivious, I had to find a way to expose what was happening by following the rules. The very rules Brad was breaking. Two can play at this game. First, I declined to falsify the report in writing. I remember the scene. Brad storming into my office, waving the incomplete compliance report. "Sign this damn form now," he barked. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I knew if I refused point blank, he'd fire me on the spot. So I did a little act. I looked very concerned and said, "Oh, I absolutely will, of course. It's just, since this is a government-required form, can you send me an email explicitly instructing me to sign it as is? Just so we have it on record that you approved." He gave me a sharp look. Brad wasn't completely stupid. He had to know being so blatant was risky. He sneered. Fine. You want it in writing? I'll damn well put it in writing. Within 10 minutes, I got an email from him. Per our conversation, I am directing you to submit the compliance documents as discussed. Brad. It was vague, but it was something. I replied and CC'd his boss, the VP of Operations. Sneaky, I know. Just confirming that you want me to sign off that all compliance checks were completed satisfactorily per the documents attached, even though we both know some steps were skipped? Please confirm. I almost puked sending that, but I figured if he had half a brain, he'd back down when he saw I CC'd the VP. Shockingly, he replied only to me, leaving the VP off, of course. Yes, do as I said. There it was, written proof that he knowingly told me to break compliance rules. I carefully saved those emails, along with copies of the real reports showing the problems. That started my paper trail. From that day on, I documented everything. I kept a log of every instance of wage theft. Timesheets he altered. I started taking photos of my team's time cards before and after Brad fixed them. I quietly encouraged a couple of my coworkers to send me any unreasonable or rule-breaking instructions from Brad via email, so we had records. Some were too scared, but a few understood what I was doing and contributed. We dubbed it our CYA file. Cover your ass. Paranoia was running high, and I was always on edge that Brad would catch on. At one point, he did grow suspicious because I stopped resisting him openly. I think he found it odd that I suddenly seemed compliant. To placate his paranoia, I occasionally pretended to be cowed. I'd apologize when he yelled, or act flustered and incompetent, playing into his ego, letting him think he'd broken me. Meanwhile, behind that facade, I was gathering ammo. One close call, one of the suck-up coworkers, I'll call her Kelly, who worshipped Brad, caught me taking a photo of a doctored timesheet in the file room after hours. I nearly dropped my phone. She gave me a weird look, so I babbled something about checking a discrepancy. The very next day, Brad was unusually friendly to me, which set off alarm bells. Kelly definitely told him something. He wandered to my desk and said softly, "You know, if there's anything bothering you, you can always tell me. We don't keep secrets on our team." His eyes were drilling into me. I feigned confusion and said I didn't know what he meant. He left, but I knew I had to be even more careful. From then on, Kelly started trailing me like a spy, hoping to catch me doing something. Still, I pressed on. I knew that as long as I followed formal processes and kept everything by the book on my end, I could not only expose Brad, but also shield myself. The company's code of conduct, which Brad laughed at, had clear sections on reporting violations, anti-retaliation, and compliance. I read that code cover to cover and made sure to adhere to it. One thing the code said was to report concerns to either your direct manager, or someone above them if the manager is the problem. It also mentioned an anonymous ethics hotline to corporate. I was initially afraid to use it. What if it wasn't really anonymous? But I realized I had to. Before I did, I got one more piece of evidence. A recorded conversation. In our state, it's legal to record if one party, me, consents. So I managed to surreptitiously record a meeting where Brad explicitly said, "I don't give a F*** what the policy says, we're doing it my way." And even more damning, when a coworker meekly objected, "But that's against the rules," Brad responded, "I am the rules. You follow my orders or you're out." That recording captured his authoritarian attitude and his admission that he was overriding official policy. Armed with emails, photos, documents, and that recording, I finally made the call. I remember my hand shaking as I dialed the ethics hotline from my personal phone on a Saturday. No way was I calling from my work phone. I gave a detailed report of wage theft, safety violations, compliance fraud, harassment, the whole laundry list of Brad's sins. I referenced evidence and offered to share it with whoever investigated. I remained anonymous in that I didn't give my name, but I knew they'd figure it out if they dug in, because few others had the access I did. That was a risk I was willing to take. What followed was a lot of waiting and a lot of anxiety. The very next week, a couple of higher-ups from corporate, including the VPI CCD, showed up on site unannounced. They met with our office HR, looking grim. Rumors started flying that an investigation was underway. We were told via email that some audits were happening and to quote, fully and honestly. Brad was freaking out, though he tried not to show it. I could see him pacing in his office, watching us like a hawk. I acted as normal as possible, but inside I was a mess, hoping my plan would work and not backfire. Corporate even sent out an anonymous survey to all of us in Brad's department about management practices. I answered it truthfully, and I know at least 4 coworkers who unloaded on that survey as well. The tension in the office was thick. Brad definitely knew something was up, but didn't know who or what. He started holding sudden one-on-one meetings with each of us, probably trying to sniff out the snitch. When it was my turn, I was on edge. He sat me down and, in an oddly gentle voice, said, "Do you have any concerns about how things are run? You can be honest." I looked him straight in the eye, maybe for the first time ever, and said, "Well, I've always been clear that I value following the company policies. I stand by that." His face twitched. Long, awkward silence. Then he smirked. "Policies don't get the job done, results do. Remember that." I just shrugged and said, "If you say so." I think that threw him off. Little did he know, the walls were closing in on him. The evidence I provided had quietly made its way to people who actually cared, or at least had a legal obligation to act. It all hit the fan about a month after I made the report. I came into work one morning and noticed 2 stern-looking corporate HR people I'd never seen before, and an equally stern-looking man in a suit, later found out he was from the company's legal department, going into Brad's office. They closed the door. About 30 minutes later, we all got an email calling an all-hands meeting in the big conference room in an hour. We'd never had an all-hands call so suddenly, my heart was pounding. Did they finally get him? When we gathered for the meeting, the CEO, who rarely visits our branch, was there, along with the head of HR. The CEO looked not happy. He spoke gravely about serious issues that had been brought to their attention regarding misconduct in our department. Everyone stole glances at Brad, but guess what? Brad wasn't there. That's when I knew this was it. The CEO basically said, without naming names, that an investigation found ethical and policy violations, and that the person responsible was no longer with the company effective immediately. There was a collective gasp. One of Brad's bootlickers actually piped up, "Where's Brad? Is he okay?" The CEO, without missing a beat, said, "Brad will not be coming back." That's all I can say on the matter. You could feel shock and also a weight lifting in the room. I tried so hard to keep a neutral face. Inside I was doing cartwheels. But things weren't over yet. As we were dismissed, I got a discreet tap on the shoulder from one of the HR investigators, asking me to come with her. My stomach dropped again. They know it was me, I thought. I was led into a private meeting with the investigator, the legal department guy, and surprisingly, the VP of operations, Brad's now ex-boss. They thanked me for coming and basically said they were aware that I had been the one to raise many of the concerns and that I had evidence to support them. Even though I tried to stay anonymous, I figured this would happen. I wasn't the only one who complained. Apparently multiple people did during the investigation, but my evidence was a linchpin. I was honest, laid out everything. Showed them the emails, the photos, even played a snippet of the audio recording. The investigator's eyes went wide hearing Brad on tape. I braced myself for a "why didn't you come forward sooner?" or some corporate speak scolding, but to my relief, they thanked me profusely. They said employees like me are valuable and that the company will be better for it. The legal guy looked a bit sick about the whole mess. I'm sure they were fearing lawsuits or fines. I asked, nervously, "Am I in any trouble?" The HR lady shook her head vigorously. "Absolutely not. You did the right thing. In fact, we wish it had come to our attention sooner." She also said I'd be protected under the whistleblower policy from any retaliation. I quietly scoffed at that, given it was too late for Brad to retaliate now. They also mentioned that law enforcement had been contacted regarding some of the, quote, most serious violations. My eyes widened. This had escalated beyond just firing. Turns out, the compliance falsification and wage theft weren't just policy violations. They were crimes. The company had no choice but to report the fraud to the regulators, and wage theft can be criminal too. They didn't go into detail, but I realized Brad might actually face legal consequences beyond losing his job. I left that day feeling a mix of triumph and fear. Triumph that the bastard finally faced consequences. Fear of the unknown, especially how Brad would react, and what exactly law enforcement involvement meant. My coworkers were buzzing with the news. Brad was gone. A few were quietly celebratory. Jim, who had been humiliated after paternity leave, literally whispered, "Ding dong." The witch is dead. Kelly, the suck-up, was in panic mode, realizing her patron was gone. She glared at me like she somehow knew I had a hand in it. I just smiled internally. Let her wonder. That afternoon, as I was packing up to leave, what a day, I got a text from an unknown number. "You'll pay for this." My stomach flipped. I had a pretty good idea who that was. 3 guesses, and the first 2 don't count. Instead of replying, I saved a screenshot and informed the HR investigator via email. She responded with concern and advised me to stay safe and alert, and that if I felt threatened, I should consider contacting the police. This was getting real. I don't know what's going to happen next entirely. Brad is out of a job, and his reputation in our industry is shredded. Word travels fast, and this is a small field. I also suspect the police or regulators will be knocking on his door soon, if they haven't already. I'm just bracing for whatever comes. I'll update when I know more, especially about the potential arrest side of things. For now, I'm just trying to process that the reign of terror at work is over. It's been surreal, and honestly, I'm having a drink, or 3, tonight, to celebrate and calm my nerves. To be continued. I'll update once the legal consequences come to light. Update 1. Hello again. It's been about 2 weeks since Brad was fired, and while some things improved at work, the aftermath has been intense, especially with Brad himself. At work, everyone was buzzing about Brad's sudden removal. Many were relieved, though a few of his cronies eyed me with suspicion, maybe guessing I played a part. Meanwhile, I gave my evidence to the police, and they were actively building a case. A detective hinted they were obtaining a warrant for Brad's arrest related to the fraud. I noticed a beat-up blue sedan near my home each night, driving off whenever I looked. Coupled with the threatening text, I suspected it was Brad. I alerted the police, who promised extra patrols by my place. Work even let me stay home a few days for safety. A few nights later, as I walked to my apartment door after a late dinner out, I suddenly felt someone grab my arm from behind. I whirled around to find Brad, wild-eyed and furious. My heart slammed against my ribs. He hissed. "You ruined my life," he snarled. "You'll pay for this," I shouted. "Get away or I'll call the police." He sneered. "Go ahead. I might finish you before they get here," and slammed me against the wall. Pain exploded across my back. Unbeknownst to him, I had already dialed 911 on my phone, and the call was live. In that moment, 2 police officers came sprinting from around the corner. They had spotted the commotion on patrol. Brad let go and tried to run, but they tackled him and cuffed him as he screamed at me. A detective told me quietly, "We already had a warrant for his arrest on fraud charges. Looks like we arrived just in time for another crime." In short, Brad was in custody and facing a mountain of charges: fraud, embezzlement, assault, and more. A friend stayed with me that night, and the company even offered to beef up my home security. Emotionally, I'm all over the place. Relieved, scared, and shocked it went this far. At least I can sleep easier now that he's behind bars. I'll update again when there's news on the legal case. I truly hope I never have to see Brad again. Update 2. Final update. It's been a few months now, and things have settled, mostly. Here's how the final chapter played out. First, Brad's fate. After his dramatic arrest, the legal wheels turned. There was a mountain of evidence against him, so, unsurprisingly, Brad ended up taking a plea deal. In exchange for pleading guilty to several charges, including fraud and assault, the prosecutors dropped a couple of lesser charges. The sentence came down last week: 18 months in state prison and a hefty fine/restitution payment. It's not as long as I personally think he deserved, but it's something. He actually glared at me in the courtroom during sentencing. Yes, I had to be there to give a victim impact statement for the assault. Extremely nerve-wracking. His eyes were just as full of hate as ever, but he didn't say a word, and that was that. Seeing him led away in cuffs for the second time felt, I won't lie, pretty damn satisfying. Good riddance. As for me and my workplace, life is weirdly normal, if quieter. Our department got a new interim director, one of the sane managers from another branch, who is big on ethics and basically spent the first few weeks undoing Brad's mess. We had training refreshers on compliance and labor rules, which felt a bit too late, but I get why they did it. The company did end up getting a fine from regulators for the compliance issues Brad caused, but thankfully, we didn't lose the big client. Still, upper management was not pleased that things got so bad, and there were a few public mea culpas. In an all-hands meeting, the CEO even vaguely acknowledged, Some of you went through difficult times under previous leadership, and thanked those who brought concerns to light. I wasn't named, but I have a pretty good guess who he was talking about. It felt nice, I guess, to be recognized in that oblique way. Not everything is perfect, though. A couple of Brad's former buddies left voluntarily soon after. One of them was Kelly. She quit without saying goodbye, probably knowing her dream of riding his coattails up the ladder was dead. The few who remained have been cordial enough, but there's some awkwardness. I get occasional side-eye from a couple of folks who maybe view me as a snitch. It's not overt, and I honestly don't care at this point. I know I did the right thing. And plenty of coworkers, even ones who were initially neutral, have privately thanked me for standing up. The workplace overall is healthier now. Morale is up, people actually take their breaks, and we even got paid out some of the overtime we were owed. Turns out corporate quietly cut checks to us after auditing the time records. They know they dodged a legal bullet there. One unexpected outcome. I didn't get a promotion or anything. I wasn't really expecting one. But the VP of operations did pull me aside one day. He said I had shown remarkable integrity and courage, and that the company was grateful. It wasn't a public award or anything, just a quiet thank you, but it meant a lot to me. In the same breath, he also mentioned that if I ever needed anything or even a change of scenery, i.e. transfer or reference, to let him know. I think they're aware I could have grounds for a whistleblower retaliation lawsuit if my career stalled, so they're making sure to keep me happy. Smart on their part, but I genuinely appreciate it.